Hello, Namaskar, and welcome to my pod, the CAA Show. CAA, as all of you know, is Conversations and Analysis. My name is Juggi Bhasin. To become a subscriber, you have to just push that or press that red button on your screen. Subscription is, of course, completely free. And we would also appreciate if you could like this video and share this video with your friends and your colleagues. All right, so lots going on in the country right now. There are these law and order situations which are developing in the eastern part of the country. We all know they are developing in the state of West Bengal, in Murshidabad. Then there are these problems which are occurring with Bangladesh. Then, of course, the worldwide problem of trade and tariffs, which is hitting practically everybody all over the world, including we are also facing a brunt of that particular problem. So much is going on, and at times, you might be happy with the government response, but there are times when you might not be. You might be a little unhappy with their responses. You might feel that there is something wanting out there. Maybe there could have been a better response. Maybe there could have been a more adequate response, or maybe a firmer response. There are so many issues, as I said, going on. And then, of course, what do? You turn and look at the opposition. Can the opposition step in? Can the opposition come up with better ideas, with a better response? And then you are there for a disappointment, because the opposition in the country, as everybody knows in this country right now, is in complete disarray. It is just not coming up with the right kind of responses which the people of India expect. It is just not be able to put its finger on the pulse of what the people need. What are their aspirations? What do they think of these issues? Can the opposition be in sync with those issues? All that is completely lacking. And therefore, today, I thought in this podcast, I would do a kind of a summing up, a kind of a understanding of what is it, or what are the reasons why the opposition cannot understand the pulse of the people? What are the things which are dragging them down, which don't allow them to give the right kind of responses, the adequate responses, or even fill the gap, I would say, of the inadequacies of the government and come up as alternatives, come up as viable solution? None of that is happening. What are the real reasons for that? I'm going to talk about all that in today's podcast. So I thought let me just kind of sum it up basically in one major problem, and all the other problems actually, they kind of flow from that. And the single biggest problem which I see in the opposition approach, which is just not in sync with what the country needs right now, is that the opposition, no opposition party, and I'm not particularly naming any specific political party, but no opposition party today has a pan-India approach. All of them have what I call a sectoral approach. They are thinking in narrow, confined terms. They are thinking in terms whether you're talking about religion, whether you're talking in terms of caste, whether you're talking in terms of economics, whether you're talking in terms of foreign policy. Everybody is thinking in very small, very specific, segmented terms. They are thinking of short-term gain, short-term how we can best take a little bit of advantage of the situation, whether, for instance, if a bypoll comes up, or if an assembly elections is on the horizon, or other elections are coming, then how can we quickly win some seats by using these things to our advantage? Nobody is thinking on a pan-India basis that what is good for the country. Because my own belief is that if parties think in terms of good for the country, of having a pan-India approach, then the benefits are much greater, much more. But that kind of thinking is just not there right now with the opposition. So that is the single biggest problem plaguing the opposition. And if you break down this particular issue into even smaller issues, then there are two or three issues which are dogging the opposition. Issue number one. The issue number one is that of social harmony, social cohesion issue. And of course, when we talk about that, we of course refer to the Hindu-Muslim question all the time. Because why is it that by default, and you can almost close your eyes and say that the opposition parties, and it's not only one of them, but practically all of them, that you are going to side with the almost I would call the hideous practices of certain communities, of the orthodoxy of certain communities, of the practices which have no relevance, which are irritating, which are uncomfortable for the people of India in the year 2025, but you will end up siding with all those practices. You're not thinking of a broader idea that what is good for the country, what is good for all the communities, not only one particularly, but you are actually end up as supporting the most hideous orthodoxy of certain minority communities. So the problem of social cohesion is a single number one problem. And linked with the social cohesion problem is a second problem, which is of law and order, where law and order machineries, especially in opposition rule states, is failing again and again to address the issues. We can see what's happening, for instance, in Murshidabad or in other places in Bengal, for instance, where the local police actually has been very inadequate, and now you have to you there was no choice but to call the central forces to kind of address the rampaging mobs and all the problems which are going on in that part of the country. So that is a big problem, because again, what really is happening is that you are making law and order as a hostage to your political thinking, to your sense of what is right in terms of societal justice. That entire thinking is not that what is the larger issue, whether the two important communities, the majority community and the minority community, have to stay in harmony, in peace. That thing is no longer there. It's that, do I can I have to address my constituency, I have to address my people. That's the thinking which has taken over, and it is reflective in law and order issues. And therefore, I'm saying the two big issues of a time for the opposition parties, where their responses for the rest of the country really is very, very inadequate, are in terms of social cohesion and law and order, and how you handle law and order. Then the third thing is, of course, the thing of what I call family values. For your own family values, for the perpetuation of your own families, of your own dynasties, for the perpetuation of anybody who's connected with your family. Everything else is on the back burner. Everything else is on the back seat. The interests of the country don't matter, but the projection, but the benefit, but the political survival of families becomes so important. And that's a third big problem which is plaguing so many opposition parties in this country. So that's these are the three major problems. And along with that, which is not such a major problem, but it's still developing into quite a bit of a irritating problem, is the problem of culturalism, where the opposition, for you could be living on some other planet where you don't understand that what do the most of the people in this country are expecting in cultural values. And the simple thing they're expecting is that today, if we are arriving as a nation, if we are an emerging economy, if we are relatively doing well for ourselves, then we have to take pride in ourselves. We have to take pride in our own background, from where we come from, our civilizational background, our spiritual heritage, our cultural heritage. But no, that is not going to be the case. You will end up by defending all the wrong things. You will end up defending all the invaders of history who have invaded India, who have ruled over India. And for me, it's amazing. The amazing factor is that they don't even understand that the rest of the country is watching them, and they are wondering that which planet do these guys live upon. They don't even understand that today in our history we want to feel proud of our history. But can we feel proud of an invader who has come and invaded over us, who has broken our temples, who has occupied us, and who perpetuated his own family rule? Are we going to feel pride in that? That's a simple logic which escapes the opposition in the country. And therefore, these four factors, I think, are the clear four important reasons why the opposition is floundering so badly. And it's not a pretty sight. Let me say that I'm certainly not. I personally, if you ask me, I'm being a centrist. I want the opposition to be as strong as the ruling dispensation in the country, because that's the only way. The ruling dispensation is on its toes and it's doing its best But if you have a floundering opposition like that, which is floundering actually on really idiotic issues, if you ask me, because these are common sense issues, you apply a little bit of common sense. And what makes you think that the minority community would not like if you try a different approach? Please try it, at least see what's there. Then you will get support not only from the minority community but from the majority community also. But no opposition party wants to try that. No, they don't want to go into that particular area which they feel will yield them no results. So these are the four important reasons. But then let me touch upon a couple of other factors which is impeding a healthy opposition to grow in this country. And I'll take you back to the era of the 70s and the 80s, of the era of Indira Gandhi. Now, personally, there are a lot of issues about Indira Gandhi. There are a lot of things which she has done which I would never ever support. For instance, the issue of Operation Blue Star and the entire approach how Punjab was handled. But give it to Indira Gandhi that more than any other opposition party in her time, she was the one who defined nationalism in the country. She was the one who understood the power, the outreach, the inner strength of this word nationalism. And she was a nationalist to my mind to a core. She might have not said it in so many terms, but that this is what she was. And that's a lesson which is lost not only on her own party, but all the other parties also, that nationalism is the glue which binds this country together. We are at the end of the day a disparate people. We are different people of, as we all know, different religions, caste, and creed. But what really binds us together is the glue of nationalism. And this is precisely the thing which has become anathema, which is becoming repulsive to so many political parties, opposition political parties in the country today. It's like the Europeans. The Europeans can't stand the word nationalism any longer, where it was actually nationalism, if you really ask me, which way Britain it was, what it was today, or Germany for that matter, or France, Italy, all these countries. Though, yes, nationalism, as used by Hitler and by the other Nazi forces, was taken to a totally different level. But in its healthy form, nationalism is important. It is the glue that binds the country together. And recently, it is the wave of nationalism which swept the ruling dispensation to power in the United States. We all know about that. So, nationalism is something you cannot ignore. And when political parties ignore that, opposition parties, then you're missing out on something which is of very, very of deep importance to people. And our kind of nationalism is what we call the Bharat Mata kind of nationalism. These symbolisms are very important to us. They are not just something which is just said for the heck of it. This concept, there are armed forces, people who are on the borders. They are fighting for, as they say, for the motherland. They are fighting. They are fighting for. Of course, they fight for the regiments. They fight for valor. They fight for all those things. But the concept of motherland is so important. For instance, just to give you an example, a Jawan or an ordinary soldier, when he goes on the front, he cannot turn his back and run away and come back, because he would not be accepted back in his village. He knows he cannot come back with shame to his village, because he's driven. And therefore our soldiery does so well, because they're driven by the impulse of nationalism, by the impulse of Bharat Mata. Now, this is an important concept which the opposition completely misses out. Then let's talk a little bit about this autonomy issue, because more and more one senses that the opposition parties, or some of whom are also regional players in their own right, are more and more emphasizing on regional autonomy, to the point where it is now becoming that some of them might even be advocating that, oh, we are just maybe some kind of, there are certain powers which the central government has, and the rest of the powers are, we are completely autonomous from the center. And that is a very dangerous trend. So, autonomy by itself is actually a desirable thing. It's a good thing. You need to be autonomous. But the fact is, our country, because we are a country of such disparate ideas, religions, of caste, creed, of dress sense, of eating habits, all kinds of things, that we need a certain glue to bind us together. There has to be a certain central control. And therefore, if we diverse that central control and we start running after this completely autonomous state of being, as if the states are maybe attached only in terms of foreign policy, then what's the difference between us, for instance, or these states, or between what used to happen in Kashmir such a long time back? That also concept was based on this autonomy of that, we are completely a autonomous unit, we are self autonomous and don't disturb us. We can't do that in this country. But unfortunately, that idea is being driven more and more, especially now in the southern states. And whether it's in terms of uh, the three language formula, whether it in terms of delimitation, whether it is in terms of population also, all kinds of issues are coming out of nowhere just to stretch this idea of autonomy. And let me give you two examples why these regional autonomy ideas don't work in this country. And if people's memories are short, then they need to remember what happened with the case of, for instance, Khalistan. I mean, that entire idea of Khalistan, we want Khalistan, there was a Khalistani separatist. And then what did that eventually achieve? It finally dawned on people that Punjab is right there in India, Pakistan is next door, it's landlocked. And even if you were to get Khalistan, where would you go? How would you function? Nobody thinks about these kind of things. And eventually, what happened to that entire movement? Thousands and thousands of innocents were killed. Security people were killed. People from both communities, both the Sikh community and the Hindu community, were killed in Punjab. What did that so called autonomy, that we want to be autonomous state, ever achieve? Nothing at all except misery, bloodshed. And that is why today there might be a lot of other problems in Punjab, but nobody wants Khalistan today in Punjab. And it's not only in Punjab. We have seen the same strain, which to that extent was working during the time of, if a lot of youngsters might not even know about this, but we had something called the IPKF, Indian Peacekeeping Force, which went into Sri Lanka to alleviate the problems of the Tamil population, because certain political entities in Tamil Nadu at that time had ratcheted up this Tamil issue to such an extent that it caused this enormous problems for the country, enormous problems in Tamil Nadu, enormous problems which are going on, of course, in Sri Lanka. Point which I'm making is that this so-called autonomy, this so-called, being chauvinistic approach of certain communities, that we have to just champion the cause, this doesn't lead anywhere. People stop thinking pan-India. They only think in terms of very narrow confines of my caste, my community, my this thing. It's always my. It's not R. That ROUR thing completely goes out of the window. So we have seen in the past, and also in the northeastern states, there were certain movements long back for autonomy. There was in Darjeeling, there was the Gorkha land movement. There were all kinds of movement, but they've all come a cropper because eventually, after so much of misery and bloodshed, people have realized that this autonomy leads them nowhere. And so, therefore, what baffles me that in 2025 also, why are some of the opposition parties are still stressing on this autonomy button all the time, when they very well, more than you and me, they know about the past, they know exactly what has happened in the past, and yet it baffles me that why should people go on with this autonomous search for autonomy all the time. And then the final thing, which again somebody needs to talk about, is this Hindu Muslim question. Let's take a little bit, spend a little bit of time on this also. The fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, who are we? And do we expect our opposition parties to only talk about the interest of certain communities or of certain people? Why is it that they are not talking about the interest of, for instance, everyone? And when we start with everyone, that means everyone, starting with, of course, the people who are the largest bulk population in the country, which is, of course, the Hindu community. You have to take their problems, you have to take their interests into circulation. You can't just have some kind of a Fabian socialist Nehruvian model of old, where you have to protect a minority community. And those again are those things which you have self created. Nobody wanted those things. but this entire protection we have to give all the time, you can't say anything, you can't do anything. If people, for instance, just to give an idea, if people want to challenge about that, change Aurangzeb Road in Delhi to some other road, what's wrong with that? I mean, why should we be honoring invaders in our country? That entire culturalism debate, for instance, on Aurangzeb, what is the point in that? It was so stupid, actually. There are people rising up from opposition parties who are defending Aurangzeb. Who was Aurangzeb? I mean, even a child in a school knows who Aurangzeb was. You don't need some opposition person or a person from the ruling dispensation to tell us who Aurangzeb was. He was a tyrant. He was a religious fanatic. And he was a man who massacred people left, right, and center. And there are historians today who are defending the fact, oh, but all the kings of that era, they were all brutal, they were all carrying on killings. I'm sorry, that doesn't cut any ice. That is not the right way. This man was a religious fanatic of a degree which was absolutely never heard of before. And so was some of the other invaders who came from Central Asia, who came from the Turkish rulers. My point simply being that please understand the concerns, the aspirations, how we want to be in touch with a past which gives us reassurance. Today, for instance, take the Jewish community, for instance. The Jewish community understands the Nazi era, but they understand for what it had done to them. They're very clear about that. But at the same time, they have sworn after that, never again. That's the concept in Jewish history. Never again means we will never allow what the Nazis did to us ever again to happen in that country. And the same approach has to be there in India also, that what large section of the Mughals did, large section of the invaders did to country, even for that matter, what the British did actually, never again. The same concept has to be there. And that is constantly being challenged by the opposition parties. And it leaves you completely befuddled that what are these people thinking of? This is not being what you call communal. This is not being right wing. This is not being that you are supporting only one political party. This is simple common sense. Ask the ordinary man on the street, and you will get all the answers, all the right answers. And therefore, this combination, as I said, of culturalism, this combination of the communal situation, all these issues, and very often you find out that the opposition parties ends up by always taking the wrong side. Yes, maybe in a certain sense, as I said, there could be short-term sectoral gains, but in the long term, you're bound to lose, and which is such a pity, because you really, really do need a strong opposition in the country to keep the government on its toes, to deliver the best from this government, and then also even to give us alternatives, whether in state assembly elections, whether in the coming election. If better alternatives emerge, why not? Absolutely. But for that, then you need to have a pan India approach. You need to understand what the man on the ground is thinking and feeling, what he aspires for. Those are very, very simple things. It's not some complicated, history lesson or some economics lesson or political lesson which he needs to learn. This is some simple things which that person needs. Who I worship, the freedom to worship, the kind of people I like to admire from my past. These are the simple concerns of the common man. And if the opposition understands that, then we can certainly have a strong, viable opposition in the country, which, believe you me, is the need of the hour today. And so, on this note, I come to the end of this podcast. I hope you liked it. Do watch our show, the CAA Show. And once again, I'm repeating, it's so simple to become a subscriber. Press the red button on your screen. You become a subscriber. Subscription is, of course, completely free. And on this note, it's goodbye and cheers from my end.